We look forward to talking to you again. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Staying with U.S. politics and the role of religion in the White House, race is back in the spotlight after Democratic hopeful Barack Obama said he wanted to expand efforts to steer social service dollars to religious groups. It's an acknowledgement of the important role the so-called moral majority has played in past elections. In 2000 and 2004, evangelical Christians, who represent 25% of United States citizens, helped George Bush to his victory. Nearly 80% of them, that's roughly 20 million people, voted for George Bush. It is unclear whether this year's Republican candidate John McCain can match that. In 2000, he was one who criticized prominent leaders of the religious right as agents of intolerance. In 2004, he called efforts to introduce a new federal law banning gay marriage un-Republican. His Democratic rival Barack Obama has been very outspoken about his Christian faith and has blasted secularists who want politicians to leave their religion out of their public service. But false rumors continue to circulate that, in fact, Barack Obama is Muslim. Both men have had to distance themselves from controversial preachers. Obama resigned from the church led by the Reverend Jeremiah Wright. McCain rejected the endorsements of pastors John Hagee and Rod Parsley over derogatory comments they made about Jews and Muslims. Earlier, I spoke with Dr. Thomas Farr, a professor of religion and world affairs at Georgetown University in Washington, and Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, who is the president of the American Islamic Forum on Democracy. I began by asking Dr. Farr what role he thought religion would play in this year's election.
Well, I think this will depend, of course, on the individual, but to the extent that people want to vote on the basis of religion, I think it's entirely natural. It's thoroughly American. There's certainly nothing wrong with it. I think people need to be discerning in the way they vote, whether they're voting on the basis of religion, economics, or otherwise. There are a whole host of reasons in the way I vote and the way most Americans vote, but religion is part of the mix. It's very American.
Can people be expected to vote still here in 2008 on their faith and their values in some kind of a block, or can factors like the economy and immigration and the war and all the touch points be more of an influence this time around? Dr. Jasser, let me ask you that first of all.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, I come down a little stronger on the fact that, remember, our country was formed on the escape of religious persecution, and I really think it's important, and America is really a shining example of the separation between religion and politics. And one of the modus operandi of the Islamists is to collectivize Muslims on politics. And I really think when I go to mosque, I don't care if I'm praying next to a communist, socialist, Republican, or Democrat, we're there to worship God. When I go to the voting booth, I have certain issues that I look at that certainly my faith inspires in regards to morality and ethics and justice, such as immigration, national security, sovereignty, and health care and things like that. But my political principles I separate from my religious, and I think the collectivization of religious groups at the times of elections I think is very dangerous and feeds into the Islamist mentality.
So there's no such thing as a Muslim bloc then, in your view, like there is a Hispanic vote or a women's vote, that sort of thing? There's no Muslim bloc?
Not at all. I think that Muslims are extremely diverse. They're not monolithic. It doesn't really make sense to me to talk about a Muslim bloc. There is an Islamist bloc. If you look even in the Middle East, the Muslim Brotherhood operates on the premise that Muslims somehow should vote together for government based on the implementation of Sharia and religious law. But from a Muslim perspective, the vast majority of Muslims, I think 60 to 70%, are non-Islamist, don't believe in Islamic states, quote unquote, but yet are pious and bring our morals to everything we do, and it inspires who we are in prayer and in practice and civic participation, but it doesn't mean that that's how we're going to vote.
Okay, let me ask Dr. Farr then, what are your thoughts on that? Like, there has been a fundamentalist Christian bloc in the past, and it just about always supported the Republicans. Certainly 80% voted for Bush last time. Do you think that religion should play a factor in terms of bloc votes?
Well, I don't think it's a question of should it. It's a question of does it. In fact, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I think people vote their consciences based on what they think is important. And I'm certainly not suggesting that the economy isn't important or won't be a major issue. But I think it's entirely natural for people who have strong religious views, whether they're Muslim or Christian or Jewish or otherwise, to reflect those views in the public square, whether we're talking about voting or whether we're talking about the laws that they were supporting. I would also disagree with Dr. Jasser about the founding of the country. I don't think we were founded to reject religious persecution. Of course, we did reject it. We were founded on the notion of religious freedom. And that is quite a different thing. Religious freedom allows people to bring their religion into the public square, not simply as a matter of voting, as I say, but as a matter of religious arguing. The separation of church and state does not prevent that. It simply sets rules that limit what one can do, what one can argue about, but it doesn't prevent us from coming into the public square, no matter what our religious beliefs are.
Let me just talk about Islamophobia. It's a phrase that's been coined lately, certainly in this election campaign. Does Barack Obama suffer from Islamophobia, the false rumors that he's Muslim? Does it matter? Should it matter if he is Muslim? Has he addressed that correctly? Is there still a misperception out there? And will that be a factor in the way people vote?
Well, sorry, go ahead, Dr. Jasser.
Yeah, I think it's important to separate the issue in that what's sometimes labeled as Islamophobia is actually a phobia of political Islam, which really does threaten the security of our nation. And I think part of the problem is, you know, you have a candidate that hasn't really made it clear where he stands in a strategy against global transnational Islamism or political Islam and its fuel of terrorism. And because of that, the inability to address that issue, people are wondering where he stands, and there's some confusion. Personally, I think that Americans generally don't interfere in Muslims' practice of our faith in the public square or privately, but the issue is there has not been clarity from either candidate about what their strategy is globally for the spread of religious freedom, especially in the Muslim world, and how we're going to combat the fuel for terrorism that has really compromised our security. There have been over 30 attacks prevented against the U.S. since 9/11.
Let me stop you there for a second. Dr. Farr, your response on that quickly,
let me
because
just say that
Islamophobia was the issue.
I mean, Senator Obama has not addressed that very well. I do think that the fact that his father is Muslim it matters if people want it to matter. I think he probably should address it. I don't think he should run from it. He said he's a Christian. I think it's very important that both of these candidates have political theologies. They have brought their religious beliefs into the public square. Again, this is entirely consonant with American history. There's nothing extraordinary about it. And so the issue of Islamophobia, I think, both candidates need to address, not because Islam is responsible for terrorism, but because certain people use Islam and draw on Islamic truth claims to commit terrorist acts against other people. We do need to talk about that. I don't think we need to run from it, but both candidates, I would agree with Dr. Jasser, have not done very well in addressing that.
Time for another short break, but when we come back, we'll be crossing live to our Kuala Lumpur News Center to look ahead to the news coming up in Asia, including a sex scandal overshadowing the Pope's first visit to Australia. Plus the death of a giant in the field of medicine, but his inventions continue to save lives. Stay with us.
Noor, what's the very latest where you are?
Our chances are as good as anybody's. Our only advantage is that we have the camera.
These poor farmers have become the human shield of the drug traffickers operating in the area.
There will be more protests like